Don't put your finger in the wind and just see which direction you feel like it's blowing, and that's what you chase. Too many people do that, and you're like a chicken running around with your head cut off when it comes to security.
Hey, it's Brett Chittum, Lawrence Technology Services, and I'm here with
Jason Slagle from CWR, and
we got Wes Spencer here. How's it going, my friends?
It's going good. This is Business Technicalities, and we're having fun with Wes today because, well, we're going to surprise him with a bunch of questions he doesn't know he's got.
I just love the name, Business Technicalities. It's such a cool play on words.
Actually, Kyle in our office is the one that came up with that name. It was pretty cool. Tom says, "Hey, I want a name for this," and Kyle came up with it, so it's really kind of cool. So how you doing, Wes?
Man, I'm great. I'm on the hot spot, so we're going to see how we go today. But other than that, I cannot complain. Weather here in Florida is amazing, and you should come visit.
I wish I was there right now because I think it's 42 degrees outside here.
Yeah. It's a bit chilly here, and I think we got like 2 inches of rain yesterday. The rivers are very, very flooded.
Cool. Yeah, we have no rain this time of year. It's dry.
Until I come down. If I come down, the rain will follow me and the cold.
I had Hurricane Nicole follow me last time I was down there. So what the heck?
I think there's like a Creedence Clearwater Revival song that's named after you then, Jason.
Yeah.
That's a crack up. All right. So, well, let's get on with this because I know you're probably really busy, Wes. I know Jason's busy. I'm never busy, so I can go on forever. Anyway, so what you got, Jason?
I think we're going to talk about, we have Wes here. So I think a good topic is to discuss like the world he plays in, right? Which is risk and cybersecurity as it relates to businesses. Business Technicalities, we do tend to have a bit of an MSP focus, but we try to keep it higher level enough so that the topics are applicable to both MSPs and non-MSPs. So we're going to talk about what it takes to protect your business from the ever-growing, changing cyber threat world. In your opinion, what do you think some threats are, like from a cybersecurity perspective, are for business? Like maybe we can talk about what some of the top ones you consider and what that looks like, and we'll talk through. I'm sure this will be relatively conversational.
Yeah, we're going to have to make it conversational because when I hear the word threat, there's so many things that go through my mind, right? Like there's the classic definition, but really when I'm talking to a business owner, when I'm thinking threat, like if we throw out or table like the actual like cyber threats for a minute, I'm just thinking what halts my business, what costs me my money, and what prevents me from continuing to grow and scale. Like those are, at the end of the day, that's it. Whether it's cyber, whether it's physical, whether it's something completely outside the realm of like IT at all, those are the things that keep me up at night. And I just think, by the way, if I can throw this out there before we even jump into those threats, so many times we miss that angle with business owners. Like we're not attacking it in a way that they think. We're not going after it in a way that they're going to listen to. Because Jason, you know this, you're a business owner. Like there are things that keep you up at night that you think about that no one else at CNWR thinks about because you're the business owner. Sure. And we don't speak to that enough, do we?
Yeah, we don't. As an example here, right? I'm in a peer group and one of my peer group members just had his office physically broken into in the past couple of weeks, right? So we're so busy running around worrying about these cyber threats, right? But like I'm sitting in our brand new building here, right? It's got a lot of glass on the front of it, and definitely, physical security for the building is something that is right now keeping me up at night.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think we owe it to ourselves to really think about that first, right? And even like the definition, I'm going to paraphrase, but the definition of a threat overall, just like in the dictionary, is like, some intention to inflict pain or damage or injury, something like that. So like as a business owner, I'm thinking, okay, what could cause me damage? What could cause me injury? So sure, like we could point to the top two things in terms of monetary damage being ransomware and business email compromise, and we could unpack those. But like, there's just a step above all of that of like, why do bad guys even use those two things? Well, going back to that definition of a threat, they want to inflict injury on you. They want to inflict pain on you so that you say, well, how do I get out of that pain? Like that's the whole reason ransomware exists, is they're like, I want to encrypt everything, not because encryption's the be all end all, but because if I can encrypt everything and I have the ability to get it back for you, I pushed you into pain to where you want to pay me money so that I can get you out of pain. That's really the essence of like what a lot of these things are when it comes to financial fraud and financial crimes.
Yeah, I think when we talk about nation states, we use another word for those people that do that we haven't readily seen applied to cyber criminals, but that word being terrorist, right? Like essentially,
They
there's
truly are.
the idea is to inflict terror, and that terror it forces action in some way or another. It forces you to change your behavior.
You know what's interesting about that is we're seeing the beginnings of this right now. I did a live stream on this a week or two, I guess 2 weeks ago. And if you look at what's happening in the conflict in Ukraine, we do know that as a whole, you talk to people that do incident response. These are companies that come in and they deal with the aftermath of a cyber attack. They'll tell you right now, volume's gone down big time. And even on the cyber insurance side, which we'll get to, that's gone down. So and I think it's for two reasons. One is I think a lot of these Russian ransomware threat operator guys, some of them have AK-47s in their hands instead of keyboards. But the other reason is, and we're just seeing this come to light, is the increase in attacks against Ukrainian-held assets and Ukrainian-held businesses is, guess what? It's up 300% over the past few years.
Wow.
And so what's happening is, and if you even look at what the attacks are doing, they're actually doing smash and grabs. They're not doing ransomware. They're actually just literally going, if they get access to something, they just destroy it. They just delete it. It's disruption. So it's terror and disruption. What's amazing to me, Jason, and Brett, you too, is that these bad guys shift based on what's going on. So sometimes they're ransomware threat actors. Sometimes they put on the other bad guy hat, and now they're actual cyber attacker, nation state, terrorism, types of attacks. And so they can badge flip, they can hat flip left and right as they need to. And it really shows us, God forbid, if we ever get into another kinetic major war with a major superpower, but there is zero doubt from now on that we will see the same thing happen in the cyber side against US businesses. And that's a scary thing.
Because it's about disruption, right? It's about how can you disrupt these people from being able to fight back.
Yep. Well, and those will be very targeted attacks. You'll see the attacks on energy infrastructure. You'll see the attacks on manufacturing and factories, right? You'll do anything to lower the ability to deliver those kinetic weapons where they need to be.
And that's probably why, DFAR 7012 and the NIST is coming down with the CMMC, and they're really trying to, boost up cybersecurity because they know that's going to happen.
Yeah, well said. So to go back to the original question, I mean, at an essence, there's two things you care about right now. Is one, business email compromise, and that's the one that's like people don't talk about as much, but we should, because it's the highest volume and it's the most damaging in aggregate. Sure, a business email compromise might only cost you $100K to $600K on average, versus a ransomware attack is going to be in the neighborhood of $250 to $1 million, but they're just so much more common because they're so much easier to carry out. So maybe we can just unpack that a little bit and talk about it. Jason, from your side, let me flip it and ask you a question. Like, you guys have seen business email compromise all the time. What is it that makes it so what is it that makes it so effective, and why?
How to say this? Users, even when trained, right? So like we use Fin, right? We use a pretty good security awareness training program. Yeah, we've got our customers all going through it, and they're paranoid, but the threat actors, they tend to be, in some cases, really good and really targeted, right? And it only takes that one mistake to you click on an app, and they act almost instantly. And now what we're seeing is they go into like sleeper mode, where like nothing will happen, and they will sit on the account for usually a couple of days, and then they start like going through and doing their things. We've been pretty lucky to catch most of the ones that we've had relatively easy or early, I guess, in the process. So the only thing they've managed to do is send out some other emails attempting to, basically spread it. But yeah, it's not the bar of doing that is still pretty low, especially when you start looking at things like application registrations, right? It's like, you go through and we're auditing all of our conditional access policies and stuff. But we definitely still have a handful of customers that, people can still install apps, and it's just an ever-changing landscape there.
It's getting, I don't know if I can share my screen or not, but it's getting more and more dangerous. Let me give an example of this. Like, I know we talk about chat GPT ad nauseum, but I
Mhm.
don't want to assume that people listening to this, especially if you're a business owner, like you might have heard people talk about it, but look how this is what's going to increase the scale is I'm going to hit share screen. I don't even know if this
Yep.
is going to work. We're going to try this here. And watch this. I just want to show how easy this is. So I haven't even literally tried this yet, right? So give me a sales script to get someone to open my sales attachment for the healthcare industry, right? So kind of
Yeah.
like, and what this does is this gives me, this is sight unseen, right? But like, look how much this is going to be. It really raises the effectiveness to get someone to open something that, like, especially if I'm operating out of another country and English is not my natural language, wham, bam, there it is. Like, this is what gets scary to me is not necessarily like chat GPT AI doing the thinking for us, but much more just this idea of like, it's really simple for an escalation in violating user trust by using
Yeah.
things like this to just accelerate.
I was going to say my wife had an issue in their business because they're all virtual, and
Mhm.
someone had gotten into their email and sent a letter from the owner, supposedly from the owner to the CFO saying, "Hey, I need you to wire this," and they
Yep.
did it. Not question,
Yeah.
no questions asked.
Yeah. I mean, I think our last three that we've had, so I think we've had three in the past 6 months. And
Mhm.
all three of them have been a compromised vendor client or a vendor or client that the person, it's not phishing. It's not like a lookalike domain. This is actually the last one. It was their insurance company, their insurance broker. One of the
Wow.
employees there got their email compromised and sent over a thing that looked like insurance stuff and had a fake 365 login, right? Like, so,
Jeez.
it's really, really hard because, we constantly get, like, I have one just yesterday, right? Like, I had a client miss a meeting with a very important vendor and they're pushing me hard to whitelist that vendor's emails always, right? Like, I missed a meeting. I don't ever want to miss a meeting again. You need to whitelist the domain. The problem is I whitelist that domain, and next time that user's email gets compromised, then suddenly it gets through no matter what, right? And then
Right.
yeah.
So
So
this brings up that question then of like, I'm a huge believer in security awareness and education. Like it
yep,
does make a difference. It matters. Like we have the insurance data to say the reason all the carriers now mandated is because it helps, but it doesn't cure all. We know that there's no tool, no control that cures all. So I guess I could say, I think we're not doing enough on the preventative space then. Like if we're trying to issue corrective controls by training our users and it helps some, but not perfectly, and we're doing other things that we've been doing for years, like email filtering, blocking things like
Mhm.
macro files coming in, inside a Word document. But I still think we need to do a lot more. And one of those things, and I don't want to get too overly technical here, but like even like the essence of the beginnings of phishing attacks, why is it that we still haven't found a good way to stop people from inputting their credentials into like a website that's not Microsoft? All these stand-up domains that look like Microsoft but aren't, and people feed their creds into it. There's probably better ways to stop some of this stuff that can really go a long way. And of course, we've talked about two-factor for the longest time. Microsoft says you implement it and it blocks 90 something percent of the attacks. We get that too, but now we're starting to see alternatives that bypass two-factor using API, using single
yep,
sign-on,
email
using what's
Genix,
called
yep,
SAML. So I
yep.
don't think we've done enough yet to really curb the volume and success rate of these attacks yet.
Yeah, we haven't. But I mean, this will continue forever to be a game of whack-a-mole, I feel like, right? It's
Yeah.
like for every innovation we get on the protect side, the attackers just find some way around it. And I mean, this will be till the end of time.
So that
Yeah.
brings up the next thought is, where does process come in to protect when it comes to business email compromise? And that also is a discussion we don't talk about enough. For example, the way most business email compromise happens is bad guys are in your email for a long time. They're waiting for the right time to pounce. They might even stand up multiple fake conversations with an
Yep.
email thread to make it look like it's all real. But at the end of the day, a lot of that's a wash if we just have good processes around how do we actually move money. Right. So like
Yeah.
if I
Mhm.
get an email from Jason Slagle and I owe him some money and he's a vendor of mine for quite some time and he wants me to change the routing instructions for the ACH, that could be a normal thing. but it might not be. So why do we not?
Right.
It's an easy thing for us to put in, oh, that's a AP change to accounts payable.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow an offline process. I'm going to literally pick up a phone number. I'm going to call it the number that I know on file is correct. It's not going to stop everything, but it goes a long way. So like, this is another thing where like, even the whack-a-mole stuff, like we could do a lot better job if we put better processes around this stuff.
That I love processes, and I love to see them flow, because usually an issue is because of a breakdown in process. I mean, and so the threat actors, they try to do the sense of urgency, right? Hey, I need this done like right now. I'm stuck in this, and they'll try to put that sense of urgency so that you don't potentially follow a process you might have.
Okay, so here's a hot
Yeah.
question for you both. Sorry to turn the table and me
No, I
interview
love
on
it.
This
you.
is fun.
You ask
Yeah.
us questions, please.
Okay, so at Write a Boom, we had Brandon Wales. If you don't know who Brandon is, he's an executive director at CISA, the national, basically our cybersecurity infrastructure security agency. And so he carries a lot of weight, right? He's not a regulator, but he does carry a lot of weight in the national voice. And one thing that he said, and I think this is a good hot take, is he said, the insurance companies sure haven't really done a great job at making this easy, because they allow ransom payments and they'll reimburse for those. And same with business email compromise. So I guess my point is, like, if I'm a business owner and I'm like, well, I've got cyber insurance. So like, why do I even care about disrupting my business processes? They're just going to pay this thing out, right? So to what degree do you guys think that cyber insurance has perpetuated this problem instead of leaving? At what point do you leave a business on your own and say, too bad, so sad, this is on you, you should have done better, versus having a get out of jail free card with cyber insurance?
Yeah.
Can I answer that first, Jason?
Yeah,
Because
do it.
I'm
I'm
the
thinking.
operations guy. And I want to take that back to another scenario. How much of a pain in the ass, I can say ass now because we're past the 20 seconds, is it when you get into an accident in your car and then you got to go have an adjuster look at it? And I spent 26 years in the insurance industry, so I'm very familiar with it. And it's the pain. There's still pain involved in having to deal with all that. So I've had customers say, I have cybersecurity insurance. Why do I need all your stuff? And I said, well, it's going to take time for the insurance company to act. You're going to lose business. You might lose clientele that the insurance company can't get back. Do you really want to chance that? And that's the process I follow when somebody mentions it, like, well, I've got cyber,
Yeah. And Brett, I'll take that. And you're exactly right. And another thing we're seeing on the insurance side of the house is, and maybe we'll get to this a little bit later, like the gotchas and things you need to know, but sublimits. So all the cyber policies have these things called sublimits. And one of the most important sublimits is the social engineering based fraud. And so what's happening is, because the carriers are recognizing there is so much of this loss that we're paying out on. One of the things we're going to do is, even if we give you $1 million or $5 million, whatever the number is, we're still going to sublimit our risk against those attacks because they're so common. And so this happens. And so sometimes you're like, oh, I got $1 million in coverage, I'm good. And then you have business email compromise at $600K and you're like, oh, I'm fine, no big deal. And then the carrier comes back and says, you have a sublimit of 100K, buddy. Like, that's all we're going to give you back on this.
Right.
And that's another thing that I think businesses really need to check, is it really isn't. And that's what I was hoping I could cue you up on, Brett. You did perfectly. It isn't a get out of jail free card.
No, not at all. There's a pain factor in it. All right, Jason, you go now.
I mean, more importantly, the problem in the end is that unless you can stop everyone from paying everyone, this is a numbers game to these people, right? Like, so as long as they're making money, even they don't care if only 10% of the users pay, right? As long as they'll just raise the ransom on that last 10% to make more money, right? So this is very much a supply and demand capitalistic enterprise that's going on here. So you disadvantage the companies that can't pay or don't pay by taking by some of us paying, I guess. Like the I'm not sure what the solution to it there is, right? We could just outlaw paying, and then maybe that's the solution.
Yeah, and in Florida, we've done so, not for all businesses, but in Florida, we passed state legislature for state-funded organizations. You cannot pay a ransom anymore. Done, gone.
And the insurance company can't either?
Nope. It's illegal. Cannot be done. So if
Yeah.
I'm a school
So-
system, if I'm a water utility funded by, municipality, something like that, you're done. You're not paying a ransom. I think North Carolina's
Yeah.
done the same thing. I think we'll see more states follow suit. Of course, on the private side, they can't do that as easily, right? This is the
Yeah.
US, right? And
Right.
so it's not
Well,
as easy.
they can.
They can.
Especially depending on where the payments are going, it's already illegal in many cases because
Right.
of sanctions and other things going on there.
Right.
You could just sanction the entities, and then it's illegal to do business with them at all.
Yeah, that's true. If you
but-
want to go to prison really quick, pay
Yeah.
someone on the OFAC list, their no
Yeah.
payment list. And that's what's
Yeah.
scary is that you don't always know who's on that list when you're paying. You don't
Yeah.
even know the recipient. So imagine you pay a ransom today, and then a year later finds out you just paid someone from XYZ terrorist org that's on the list. Uh-oh, that's not.
Yeah.
I mean, they're serious about that
knock
stuff.
on the door. Knock
The-
on the door,
the-
and hey,
The first time a water utility down there gets hit, we'll see how well that holds up.
Mhm.
Right,
yeah,
because I am incredulous that they won't pay, right? Like, because I believe, was it JBS Foods or the pipeline?
Yep.
One of the two was very staunch in the fact that they weren't going to pay. Guess what? They paid.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
And this goes
it's-
back
yeah.
to the beginning of the conversation, doesn't it? Of like they're pushing you into pain to force you to pay to get out of it. And when you recognize that, then you can really start to we nerds call this threat model. You can really start to build your understanding of what the bad guy's doing and how they're going to act. This
Yeah.
is why data exfiltration has become a
Yeah.
thing. This is
Yeah.
why we saw one threat actor that's now deleting your data instead of encrypting it. And then they keep a
Yep.
clear text copy. So they'd be like, hey, you don't have to worry about decryptors anymore. We've heard you don't like to decrypt our stuff and sometimes it doesn't work well. So we'll just give you the files back clear. Like, you just want to make it easy
Yeah.
to pay.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
so that does have an advantage. And the advantage is, well, okay, maybe we're finally making a use case for limited upload internet connections. Maybe this is the use case because it takes a long time to exfiltrate, a ton of data, and you lengthen that window of time that you have to catch them versus the encryption, which with some of the new Rust or Go based encryptors can actually be relatively quick.
Be right back. I'm going to go start my own CLEC and offer T1s again, Jason.
Yeah,
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
No, it's
Yeah, but there's
it's-
ways to prevent that pain, right? Or to help mitigate that pain, right? A backup for one. Having backup.
Yeah,
Isn't that-
but the threat actors weren't born yesterday, so you're starting to see things like they know exactly how long your backup retention window is, and they will wait it out, right? So they may not wait out encrypting, but they will wait out compromise, so that the oldest backup you have to restore, every single backup you have to restore, they're still in your system.
So how can we then mitigate pain? I mean, we shouldn't pay, right? Because pain makes
Yeah.
it worse. Backups can be affected. What can we do?
So let me throw this out there for a minute. Not all breaches are the same.
Right.
Some happen from gross negligence. Some
Mhm.
happen from putting the right things in place and it still happens. And why do we treat both of those the same? I don't think that we should. So Jen Easterly literally, I think yesterday, made a comment, and I'm going to cover this on my next live stream. She made a comment around this of like, hey, look, I'm not sure that this whole idea of like, some companies are doing the right things and some are not. Like, why is that okay? And of course, that brings up the question of, well, who's the arbiter of like, okay, you had a good, mature cyber hygiene and you didn't. So this breach shouldn't have, you made your bed, you lay in it, buddy, versus you over here. Oh, you were doing the right things. You get a pass. You should have cyber insurance. You should be insurable. We need to figure that out. In the in a lot of other areas of insurance, we do this, but we haven't done a good job of this on the cyber side yet. And I think we need to figure that out.
So right now they pay him the same. I mean, so being in the industry, I did cyber insurance when I was in the industry wasn't the big thing, right? So are they pay them just if someone was totally negligent, is paid the same?
Yes, as long as there's no
Generally.
exclusions that get you, that would
Okay.
prevent it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
As long as you haven't lied on your application, right? Like, and even that, based on talking to some people in the industry, we're not really seeing a lot of people denied because they because they fibbed. As long as it wasn't like blatantly lied on their application, they're still usually paying. Like, but at what point, like, one could argue already that you could make an argument about E&O versus a cyber policy, right? Because if negligence and stuff should, in theory, be covered under like an E&O policy, right? Like an errors and omissions policy, and not under a general liability policy, correct, Brett? You're the insurance guy, or Wes?
Well, I mean, insurance is interesting because it's they supposedly do all risk mitigation. I mean, they think about that before. That's why we have to do these surveys, correct? And we have to answer all these questions. But Wes, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, the reason that tech E&O came about is for that exact reason, is that typical errors and omissions don't have any coverages for like cyber and digital related crime. It was created from the get-go for just normal errors and omissions, process-based problems, just the normal things you would see. And so tech E&O came out as a result of that, wait, we don't have a policy that covers those things. And that's really where tech E&O came about. And so like if you're an MSP today, I think most people know this, but the reason you need tech E&O and not just a cyber policy is tech E&O is going to cover those issues where your own tools get popped, causing something to happen to your clients, just as a good example. Versus if I'm a client, I want just a good cyber policy to protect myself of the things that may happen that hit me, that, phishing email, something like that. So tech E&O has become this critical thing that you got to have, and also one of the hardest things out there to get anymore because of this.
Yeah, it used to be that tech E&O only had to cover me against like my tech doing something stupid. But now that something stupid almost certainly results in a ransomware payment.
Yeah. Because bad guys know who you are now,
Yeah.
Yep.
How many are we seeing companies get hit twice? I mean, they get a ransomware and then they pay it. Oh, now everybody knows they're going to pay.
Usually not by the same threat actor, I believe, but there are definitely documented cases of companies getting hit by a different group shortly thereafter.
Right.
And
it's an interesting dynamic.
I think one of the reasons that happens too is so in this supply chain of criminals, you have these groups people called like initial access brokers. And so these are the ones that get access to a machine. Maybe you install their browser toolbar and it phones home and it lets the bad guy in. Maybe you opened an email. And what happens is a lot of times these ransomware actors will purchase access from the initial access broker. The access broker just wants to get access and then sell it off. And they stay kind of under the radar because they're not the ones that are doing the nasty. So that can be a reason sometimes, is that if the company has really poor hygiene and maybe forensics wasn't done correctly and there's still access from the get-go and it wasn't killed off. But then, also bad guys talk to each other. For sure they do. They communicate. They're very braggadocious in how they operate. So, and very competitive. So, absolutely.
Cool. So should we pivot to insurance proper a little bit here? Like, so let's talk about if you're a business that's not an MSP, what are you thinking insurance wise you're looking to cover, right? Like, is tech E&O necessary if you're not providing technical services to somebody else, right? Like, obviously everyone wants cyber. We're instructing, much to Eric Tild's chagrin, our clients to carry at least, I think I gonna have him review it, but I think it's worded generally okay in our contract, at least per our lawyer. We instruct our customers that they need to carry the proper amount, but it needs to be at least $1 million, right? Like of just general cyber liability coverage.
Yep. So
what else do we need?
Let me say this. None of us three are attorneys, so none of this is legal advice, and none of us now, Brett, you may still be licensed, but I am not licensed, even though I work for an insurance company. So nothing that I'm going to tell you is specific insurance advice for your company. We're just going to speak in generalities. And Brett, I don't know if are you actually a licensed agent?
I actually let it go. I decided not to do my continuing ed this year. So I'm no longer licensed.
So there we go. Now that the disclaimer's out, we're not giving you official advice for anything, right? I think so. When it comes to tech E&O versus cyber policy, obviously the correct answer is go consult your insurance professional, right? Come talk to us at Fifth Wall. fifthwallsolutions.com. We'll guide
Yep.
you in whether you need it or not. We can help you find it if you need it. But generally speaking, yeah, Tech E&O is for those that offer some kind of service, right? So like in my days at Perch, we needed Tech E&O because what happens if something happens with us and maybe one of our devs gets compromised and malware gets pushed to an agent that hits Jason, who uses Perch in their computers? That is going to be on us. And Tech E&O is going to cover that. A regular cyber policy is not. That's not what it's designed for, right? But where you need just a good cyber policy is, let's say you're a CPA firm. Let's say you're a manufacturer. Let's say you're, healthcare. You just need a good cyber policy to cover those things like ransomware, the business outage kind of stuff. It'll cover things like reputational damage, public relations, potentially regulatory fines. There's a whole bunch of things stacked into there to a good policy that's going to give you coverage when you yourself are a victim of something and of your own doing that's limited to you.
And let's truly understand the way insurance works. Is insurance companies looking to find out where they can get their money back as well. You talk about if it's an E&O issue, they're going to go after that E&O policy, or they're going to say, you have to go after that E&O policy. That's why it goes back to what we were talking about, the pain, right? You need this insurance, but you also need to protect yourself up front as well, because there's going to be some pain involved. You're not going to be restored within an hour after a hit, ever.
Exactly right. And there's some things in those lines of coverage that are reimbursed and some that they will cover for you. And a lot of people don't know that. So for example, very typically the ransomware payment, which is one of the most expensive line items in the event of a ransomware attack, can be a reimbursed event. So you may have to go to whoever their broker is that handles those payments. Like Coveware, for example, is one of my favorite companies that gives. They're my favorite because they produce a lot of actionable information, and so they'll do it for you. But if the ransomware payment is $250K and they have a 10% on top, you are paying them that money and then you'll get reimbursed later. Same thing a lot of times when it comes to like third party, like sometimes the forensics might be covered, but some of like the restoration services and other things you may have to pay per hour by a company they bring in. So these are things that I don't think people realize. It's not like it's not like the carrier's like, hey, here's our credit card number. And so like just put anything on it you need. And as long as you stay under the limit, you're good. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's and that, just as a caveat here, if you are hit and you are considering paying, don't pay it yourself. Find somebody else to pay it for you.
We
can't say that loudly enough. Yeah, because as Jason said, as you said earlier, the FinCEN FinCEN and Treasury are the two big boys in the financial fraud and terrorism payment world. And they have this thing called OFAC, or Office of Foreign Assets and Control. They maintain a list of who you can and can't pay. And they clarified, it's not like they changed the rules, but a few years ago, they clarified in the height of ransomware attacks, you better be careful. If you pay a ransom and you haven't gone through the correct Bank Secrecy Act stuff, this is a felony level issue. Now, to be clear, we've never seen anyone like indicted and arrested and charged and convicted over this yet. But like, you have to think that day might come in the situation where it's a big company that clearly pays something that shouldn't have. It's going to happen to somebody. So let it not be
100%. Right. Like we've seen that a couple of times. The one CISO that just got like basically the first one to get whacked for some of this stuff. We'll see the first person to pay get whacked too. Just at some point they got to establish the case law, right? So they're gonna want to have the case.
They have to set precedents in every case law. So I worked in the banking industry for a short period of time, and OFAC was huge, and even things coming through the bank and payments going out, they're checking that as well, and they're stopping payments so that doesn't happen. But what if one goes through, right? I mean, it's a scary thought. Okay, I got to step us back a minute because we talk about protecting your business, and we've talked a lot about horror stories, and what can we do to protect our business?
There's a lot of things. That's such a hard yes. Right. So I think that the essence of that question, Brett, comes back to like, there's a million things we could do. And if we had Bank of America's, $200 million a year budget to cybersecurity, there's a lot of things we would be putting in place, but we're not that. We don't have those things. And so, I get asked that question all the time. And my answer back to that is we have a starting ground. We have a Rosetta Stone in front of us. And that Rosetta Stone are these security frameworks. And if you're listening to this and you kind of loosely know or you don't know what they are, basically, there's a lot of people that are 10 times smarter than all of us put together on this. And you listening to, no offense. And those people have spent thousands of hours getting together saying, let's look at the commonality of these attacks. What's caused them? And what are the defenses that could really have stopped a lot of these, right? Now, we know we can't stop everything. That's impossible. But there's a whole lot of like wheat and chaff that we can sort out by doing the minimums. And so when I think about this, and we can jump into some specific controls, I'm happy to do that. I don't want to avoid the question, but I do want to just start with, don't put your finger in the wind and just see which direction you feel like it's blowing, and that's what you chase. Too many people do that, and you're like a chicken running around with your head cut off when it comes to security. There's no direction to it at all. And so this is where security frameworks are awesome. And if you're looking for one to start, take a look at CIS, Center for Internet Security. They are a nonprofit. They're in it for the common good. And they have 3 groups of implementations. So you can start at the basic level. And the basic level does so much good for your company to really go down a maturity journey. So I can, if we want to, I can jump into like from the cyber insurance side, the controls they want you to have in place to be insurable. But even those, there's still things that are missing that are really valuable. So let me just open up with that first.
That sounds great.
Opening up with that
opening up the insurance, right? Like, so I mean, we can draw on source data too, right? So like, this isn't, as Wes had alluded to, this isn't made up, right? If you look at things like the Verizon data breach report, right, the things that are about to get recommended here will close something like 83% of initial access, right? And the thing is that like, you don't lock your door because it's stopping somebody from getting into your house. I can get into your house 18 other ways. I presume you have windows. I presume they don't have bars. Even if they do have bars, there are plenty of ways for me to get into your house. You lock your door so that somebody goes to somebody else's unlocked door to get in, right? It's like the old adage of, I don't need to run faster than the bear. I only need to run faster than you, right? It's kind of that thing there, right? You just don't want to be the lowest hanging fruit.
Yep, that's right. That's exactly right. So first control is multi-factor everywhere. And this is one that universally everyone's going to agree with. Anybody that knows security will say, yep, that's a thing. You know, and I know there's always the naysayers that are out there like, yeah, but you can bypass that stuff. You know, it's sort of like, yeah, you know, I know about this one car wreck that happened where they didn't have the seatbelt on and they died. So therefore I don't want to have, you know, seatbelt. I'm like, you idiot. Do you know how many millions of seatbelts lives have been saved by having seatbelts? So sure. But the reality is that the vast majority of this stuff is these authentication based attacks can just cut the head off a snake from anything else bad happening if we just put it everywhere. So I'm sorry, Mr. CEO, it's time for you to have it in place. And don't whine to me in this day and age that it's so disruptive to your business when we all know that we can put it in place in a way that like it's a check based on, you know, behavioral kinds of things. If you log in from a new device, I'm gonna multi-factor you. If you log in every single day on your phone and you're checking your email, I'm not gonna multi-factor you every time. Like we've learned the trials of this way of multi-factor to where it's not as bad as you think it is. And I challenge you to try it again because you're gonna have to try it again because you can't even be insurable without it.
Right.
Yeah. It more to that point, like we are starting to learn that not all multi-factor is created equal. So I know in April, Microsoft is going to force it, but if you're not already doing it, you should look at using something like number matching or some sort of risk-based thing like Wes mentioned there, right? So that somebody can't spam you with, 300 attempts in an hour and you finally just hit approved because you're so sick of it.
That's a scary thing, and that's one of those things where user education goes such a long way. Reach out. If you're having problems with multi-factor, you should reach out to your IT provider and say, hey, this is wonky. Can you take a look?
I mean, the other side of that makes my brain hurt is like, on what world would some backend system allow 100 requests to come through without going, is there a problem here? I just don't understand it.
Yeah. Like, why would a user ever do that?
Yeah.
It's clearly some kind of system issue or it's something with malice intent. Yep.
Well, I mean,
so what's the next one?
Yeah, I was going to say, what's control number 2?
Control number 2 is, again, another obvious one that nobody reasonable or rational will disagree with, is not just backups, but segregated immutable backups. So what we mean, and they ask this question, the carriers will say, they don't ask anymore, do you have backups? Because they're done with that. Of like, oh yeah, I got like this Dropbox thing. I save my files to, so good. They've learned the trial these ways. So now they're like, do you have backups that are segregated off your network and are immutable? In other words, meaning these backups are not on your network. They're in a different network somewhere else, usually in the cloud. And immutable means that you can't just go in and delete them. You can't just go in and say, oh, I've got access into it and I want to delete these backups. No, you can't change, and you can't change them or edit them either. I can't change them. You can't change them. The only way they change is when they fall off according to the retention schedule. So now that doesn't stop everything, as we know, because sometimes in a big ransomware event, you're trying to recover all your files and you just can't recover them all in time. Right. But that's a big deal just in terms of a control that has got to be in place. And it's shocking to me that still a lot of businesses don't have this in place.
Yeah. It's just another safeguard.
Yeah, you just tied into something there I think that we should talk about too. So you mentioned the cannot restore in time. Does it make sense? And should businesses be putting together like a tiering system for their assets in order of criticality and priority, right? So like in the event of attack, restore this group first, this group second, and then the rest of them can wait. Like, is that a thing we should be looking to do?
It is. And this is actually called, and I know you know this, Jason, you teed me up on it, but this is called a business impact analysis. And this has been a tried and true thing for over a decade now of like, you should understand as a business owner, how do you make money? You should understand based on how you make money, which systems are the most important to be able to continue to make that money. And then once you know that, you can begin to establish a criticality of systems and even like the prerequisites to those systems. Which of these need internet? Which of these needs specialized skilled labor? Which of these require a unique kind of computer or resources to happen? Which of these have inputs that come from third-party sources that we might have to receive to run? Like, these are important questions that actually don't take you more than a few hours to really build, but are one of the most important processes in the triage of a major event versus, again, running around with your like a chicken with your head cut off. You actually know what to do.
The CISA guy, he kind of alluded to it and hinted at it, but it's my understanding on the pipeline incident that none of their their operational technology was impacted, but the real issue underlying was they couldn't actually bill the customers, right? So they weren't going to ship gas they couldn't bill for. And so when you think about how money's made, like we had a client, or I think there might be a former client now, that they were a doctor's office and basically said that they would go back to pen and paper. And it finally took the billing lady to say, yeah, we can practice with pen and paper. You can see the patients, but I can't bill them. Right. Like when we're seeing 70 patients a day per doctor, like I can't manually process billing on 70 patients on pen and paper in the amount of time we'd need like 16 times the amount of staff we have. Right. So, thinking about that logically, it's really easy to look at what you have business wise and just assume that technology isn't involved, but it is way more involved than I think most people generally realize in some of these industries that aren't high tech.
Well, yeah. I mean, look in the medical industry, when they go to submit, they have to submit that electronically. They can't write it down on paper and just type in. It's got to go from system to system, and that's a HIPAA thing. So,
so this brings into, these are things that I know it feels like it's a burden, but it's not. It's not as time consuming as you think it is, and it's immeasurably valuable. So that all of this comes back to not just business impact analysis, but even understanding how you make that money and what your backup systems might be, so to speak. And this even gets back into NIST. NIST is a National Institute of Standards and Technology. They even have this term called cyber resilience, and the official term of it, I'll paraphrase, but it's like the measure of your organization's ability to continuously operate in the midst of adverse conditions. So it doesn't assume that you're going to be super healthy and nothing's going to affect you. No, when adverse conditions come in, how do you stay operational? Maybe not as operational, but still operational. So those are valuable questions of like, okay, well, if this system does get hit and there is no paper process, or we can't actually do everything over paper, what would the alternatives be? And how quickly could we restore those systems? And what would those processes be to get that? It might even be something as simple as like, heck, we're going to go to Best Buy and buy a laptop. And, I don't know what it might be, but like, you really have to think through what are those alternatives to continue those critical pieces, not everything, but the critical pieces.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, as a DevOps guy that's practiced DevOps since before it was called that, we have a term called anti-fragile, where we try to design our systems to they just handle adversity and automatically adapt to that. And, I think we're getting to a time where we need to design our systems that way from a security perspective too.
Right.
Yep. All right, number 3.
Yep, number
So
3.
number 3 is one that most people will agree with, and everyone on this call will, is endpoint detection and response. EDR is what we call this thing.
Mhm.
We are seeing a shift by the carriers, and rightly so, into 24/7 managed EDR. But
Mhm.
here's what happened is in the old days, 4 years ago, they're just like, do you have antiviruses and updated? And then they're like, well, why are we still having all these freaking breaches when everyone has updated antivirus? Oh, because AV is looking at this thing called hashes. I don't know what that means, but it just means it's not finding stuff. So the carriers aren't super smart, but they're great at, knee jerking. They can jerk knees all day long. And so when it comes to EDR, they're starting to realize, wait a second, these EDR things are operating a little bit differently. It's not just that they have like these, like, the marketing buzzwords of like AI driven EDR that finds the threats before they occur, but it's much more, they just have better insights into the activity of the machine. And so just give you a super simple example, super simple. And this is like, Jason will make fun of me for how simple this is, but if I see PowerShell doing some kind of like web invoke outbound request, that's sketchy. So I should probably take a look at that. And EDRs are built for that. They're literally built to find the tactics that bad guys might use and the odd things. And so it's becoming a big deal.
So it's behavior-based analytics versus like looking for known bad things.
Right.
And isn't this just like all the other things we do in the real world? Like an alarm system is not looking for, the FBI's top, most wanted. They're what they're looking for is, why did I see this door open at 2 a.m. and why do I see hallway monitor? It doesn't matter who the bad guy is, and it might even be that it's not a bad guy, but it's still alerting us to, whoa, that's not normal, we should take a look. And it goes back to what you just said, like the purpose of an alarm system isn't to keep a bad guy out, but it's sure as heck is to tell me when a bad guy might get in, right? That's the whole point.
Cool.
Now, one more thing.
There's 3. Yep.
Here's the thing about EDR, though. We've seen on the insurance side a bunch of people get popped and they have EDR because they had some crappy license version that doesn't actually do anything. It just isn't. They either it was licensed and they didn't enable it to do like automatic preventions and cording machines off, or they bought a bad, like not a bad license, but they didn't buy a license that has the capability. And they're like, oh, it's just, I'm not going to name a name, but it's XYZ EDR. And that's why they bought it. They didn't know. And the second thing is, if you don't have people watching over it, that we've seen incidents and claims happen simply because the EDR did trip, the EDR did alert, but no one did anything about it because no one was looking at it. And that's just, that should never happen.
Well, it goes like you put oil in your car, but if you never check your oil and it goes down, it's your engine's gonna, it's the same thing, right? You've got to be monitoring. You've got to always be looking at this.
Yeah, it comes down to, I mean, that's a really interesting discussion. Like literally the only option path for us right now when you buy our services is whether or not you get 24/7 SOC coverage, essentially, right? And so there are probably certainly businesses that don't, a lot of small businesses probably don't necessarily warrant 24/7 immediately response SOC, as long as you have something that's willing to host isolate, you can potentially deal with it in the morning. But that is definitely a case. Somebody has to be watching and triaging those things when they come in a timely fashion, because we've definitely seen trips on things that like you caught it before anything bad happened, but it's like, man, there was a different alert like 2 days ago that if somebody had caught that alert, you could have cut it off faster.
And you just nailed it. The last thing I'll say on this is people need to realize that it's not like the movies. It's not push button, get ransomware. It's usually a couple days, anywhere from 1 to 7 days of a bad guy. Once they have the foothold, how do I get deeper? Because they don't know your network. So they have to figure out, how do I escalate privileges to get deeper in? How do I establish persistence so I can stay in and get back in? And then how do I move laterally through the network so I can get access to everything to run ransomware everywhere? And that takes time. And that it gives you opportunities for things like EDR to say, hello, 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 hello. We're seeing enough things. So that's why it's really important. You can't just have an EDR in place. You got to have somehow you got to be paying attention to those alerts in some form.
And that's where an RMM comes into place. And Kelvin talks about scripting and some of the things he's written, right? That can sense some of these things happening in the background, that changes that were made to programs. I mean, we have so many tools at our ready, but are we using them?
This whole discussion has me thinking about control charts and like, man, where could we use other aspects of the DevOps process and the Deemling method, right? Which is Deemling being the guy, I think that's how you say his name, the guy that wrote the book Into the Crisis, I believe it's called, which talks about like the Toyota production system and how like they use control charts, which are, you know, you measure the mean and then you look so many standard deviations away from the mean. It's like, how could we use some of those techniques? Like this machine normally runs this mean of processes. If we go 2 standard deviations out of the mean, are we alerting on that? I don't know. Whole second brain thoughts running around here in the background.
I like it. Sounds like a good GERT-con talk.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Do you have a control 4, or are we?
Yeah, control 4 is we'll go on this one quickly, is security awareness training and phishing. They want to see both of those together. They're going to ask questions like, are you testing your users? And they'll ask the cadence. So things like, are you doing it? Usually they'll ask it this way. Do you test them? Yes or no? And then if yes, they'll say how often, annually, biannually, or like quarterly or more. It's usually some derivative of those 3. And it's okay, by the way, if you come back and you say, we only test twice a year. I'm not saying you should, but the carriers will just say, at least you're doing that. And keep in mind, the carriers are gathering data. So here's what's going to happen. If they notice there's a trend in reduction of losses for them, if you test, monthly versus once a year, eventually they're going to mandate it. So they're asking the question now, but they want to make sure that you are training your people and you are testing your people, because they've shown that it does have an effect. It's not perfect, as we talked about at the beginning of this, but it is important.
Right.
Yeah, you actually hit on something great there accidentally, which is that not every question on the questionnaire is risk rated, right? So like not every question on the questionnaire is going to get you denied or make your coverage cost more. Some of this is just data collection for them to be able to do analytics later.
Yep. Right. In fact, that's going into these 5, these are the ones that are pretty much critical. And then, the rest of them usually largely are data gathering. That's exactly right. Okay. So the last one is one that is starting to emerge, but as you guys will all agree, it's critically important. It's vulnerability management. They want to make sure that to some degree, now what they call vulnerability management is not probably the pure essence of what true vulnerability management is. But at a minimum, they're like, hey, are you scanning your network here? And are you addressing patches in a timely manner, usually in 30 days for crits and highs? That if you're doing that, you're doing well. Now, not every carrier is mandating this yet, but most are asking for it. And I think in this day and age of like all the exchange, let me tell you guys, the exchange vulnerabilities were probably the #1 highest volume of ransomware caused attacks and payments that were out there. So they're really waking up to like patching is a big deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially I don't know. I start wondering, like, at what point are they going to ask how much stuff you have exposed to the internet? Like, so PCI DSS has a bunch of things like about, what you have directly exposed to the internet and both ingress and egress filtering. And it'll be interesting to see as time goes on if they start to require like extra coverage or extra controls if you have ports open to the internet.
Well, so yes, they do already. From my understanding, they will say, "Hey, these because we had a scan done, right? The insurance company ran a scan on us, and they said this, you have this port open, this, there's these things you need to fix, or else we're gonna have to limit this coverage, or we're gonna have to deny, we're gonna have to not give you this coverage." They do that already, actually. Am I correct? I mean, we had that done.
Only a couple.
2 that I know that are doing it, Coalition and Corvus. And actually with Coalition, if you go to their website, control.coalitioninc.com, you can do a free scan from them. You have to sign up to an account. They won't give you all the details and data, but they'll give you some. And hear me when I say this, those external, we call those like attack surface kind of management kind of tools. Those kind of tools, they can help, but they're not always perfect. And we see a lot of problems with them, but at least it's, to your point, Jason, it's an iteration in the right direction of like, what exactly are we getting into here beyond the questionnaire that you might not know of? Because we all know the whole insurance space is based on what's called good faith. So it's always been this way. So they don't typically go in and test all of this stuff for you. So if you say that you're not running like a remote desktop web and they just say, okay, great, we trust you on it. How do they know? So now this whole, like, we're going to actually scan and make sure of these things to make sure you didn't forget about something. It's becoming a thing.
How long until on-prem? How long until on-prem exchange is just uninsurable?
I don't think we're far away from that. Yeah. So we did see for the very first time just this month a carrier come out and say no more remote. We have it's called exclusions. So they said we now have an exclusion in your policy. If you have a breach and a claim made to us and remote desktop web was part of it, we're not paying. And I think you're
Wow.
going to see the same thing happen with Exchange. You're going to see
Exchange,
them
yeah.
say, if you had on-prem Exchange and you try to make a claim, we're not paying. So those
I wonder.
exclusions, you got to pay attention to those.
So yeah, I was just gonna say this makes it even more important that whoever is in charge of that risk, which ironically enough, I think 2 of our 3 business email compromises in the last 6 months were actually the person that deals with the risk. I don't know if they target those people or what, but it's important that the person that understands and is in charge of dealing with insurance talks to somebody that knows about those exclusions and those limitations, because it's getting, as insurance companies tend to have to pay more out, they're going to get tighter with it and the exclusions will increase. And so understanding whether or not you are bound by them or going to be limited by them, I think is going to become increasingly important.
The funny thing about insurance policies is you have what's covered is 4 paragraphs. What's excluded is 17 pages. And that's what it's becoming. It truly is. And I think people need to understand that, especially somebody that is the risk manager within a company.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
So there's a big takeaway for you. If you are not aware, if you cannot answer what your exclusions are and what your sublimits are, you need to go talk to your insurance agent. You've
Right.
got to understand those two things, because sometimes not all insurance is created equal, especially in cyber. So you got to understand those things.
Right. Absolutely. Well, we've almost
Okay.
gotten to the hour
Yeah, I was
point,
gonna
guys.
say we're coming up on an
Wouldn't feel
hour,
like
Brett.
it.
We should probably wrap.
Well, I'm just gonna say I'm gonna restate your 5. 2FA, number 1, right? 2, backups, immutable, offsite, off your network backups. 3, an EDR that works, right? 4, security awareness, phishing simulation. That's highly important, and probably not only twice a year, probably more on a regular basis. And then finally, vulnerability management.
Yep. Those are the things. And
That's how you
please don't email me hating me saying there's more, because there are more. Those are just the
There are,
insurance ones. Like, for example, throw one out. Network
Mhm.
segmentation, big deal.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't cost you a penny extra in terms of tools. You should put that. So don't hear me say those are the 5 best or the 5 only. But yeah, those are 5 big ones.
Absolutely.
Asset tracking and management, because you can't do the rest of them without it.
Yeah. I don't know. Any final thoughts from US?
This has been a pleasure. And if I can help you in any way, just reach out, fifthwallsolutions.com. We haven't talked about what we do. We don't need to, but that's what we do, is insurance. So happy to talk to anybody, MSP, end user, questions on this. This is what we do.
Awesome. Jason, anything from you?
No, this was super fun. It's good to have our first guest on, right? So we'll have to continue.
You never
doing this
told
in the
me I'm your
future.
first guest.
You are
the first guest since Brett and I have taken it over. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we've been having fun, and you were like, you're special now. You're a special place in our heart. Maybe no.
Well, my mom says I'm special, so if you two say I'm special, then I know it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, hey, thank you, Wes, for your time. Jason, as always, it's a pleasure having doing this with you. And this is Business Technicalities. Make it a great one.